Your nerd weirdo stalker. I looked in the back, right, for the bios, and it said she was at UC Berkeley. I was at UC Berkeley. So I found her office, and I went. You know, office hours. So again, I wasn't taking a class with her. I just went to her office hours, and I'm sitting in front of the door, and this other student comes for Cherrie's office hours, and she's like, "Are you taking a class with Cherrie?" Because I've never seen you in class. I go, "No, I'm not taking a class." She's like, "Why are you here?" And I'm like, "Well," and I told her, whatever. And she's like, "Oh," so then Cherrie opens the door, and the student who was in there left. And then the one who was waiting with me, she goes, "You could go. You gotta go." So then I went in and I introduced myself, and then she was a great teacher because she sees the student she's never seen before, and so she did talk with me, and she asked me questions and talked to me like a human being, and heard that I wrote. I shared that I wrote, and she offered to read some of my writing. So I later let her read some of my writing, and there were some lesbian-themed poems, but I wasn't out, right? So I went back to talk with her, and she's like, "Well, I love these poems here." Like, seem like they're, and I was like, 25 years ago, right? So this is, she, we didn't know it was going to happen, but she's my comadre, right? She's the one I mentioned in the previous poem about the slot machines. So many levels, we share many things now. So I just want to share that part about her as a teacher and as a writer, and it's very important to me, and I know to many people. And one of the beautiful things that she gave me was a love, not just because I'm from here, but I wasn't writing like they should have been. But Cherrie not just taught on campus, but she taught a writing workshop in the community, and it was through Bravo for Women in the Arts. The first one that I took was for lesbians of color. The next one was called Indigena as Scribe, and that was for Latina, Native, all of us women. And it was a range of like 22 to 60 years old. Now I'm almost 60. I was closer on the 20 side before. And we came together in community, and I love those workshops, and I love the community. I love community, right? And we don't have to just learn. Some of us are teachers. We're professors. But we know learning happens outside of, great learning, wonderful learning, life-saving learning happens outside of the classroom, right? And I just want to thank Cherrie for that. So one last thing I want to mention is that she, of course, helped me generate some work. And then when it came time to finally come out with my book, she graciously edited it. She's not credited as an editor, but she basically edited it. But she did write the prologue. And I thank her. And, she's written so much. So she's a writer. She's a hardworking writer, a teacher, and family member, community member. So please, let's welcome Cherrie Moraga.
Be here. I want to mention Rose, who was part of that Indígena scribe class. It went on for 4 years, and we started up to 20, and there was 12 people that came for 4 years. The same 12 people, which is sort of amazing. And there's a lot I miss in this life. And one thing is I miss really having the moment that your only agenda is each other. Your only agenda is to make, there's no competition. I love the thing about craft. That was really great. That comment about craft, it's not about that. It's like, I've learned this over the years, really and truly, and many of you teach, but your job when you teach a creative writing class is to recognize custom design for each and every person in the room. And that means sometimes you have to change what you plan to do. it just means you gotta listen. And I've been really blessed to do that work for a long time. And anyway, so Cathy was really, she's telling me all that about me, but but the story, I remember that about Cathy. And but very soon after that, at UC Berkeley, I was a lecturer there. They had this. Was it the Rasa recruitment or something? Is that what it was? It was a big thing, right? It was like, so all this Rasa's coming from all over the place. And they had everybody talking about the various issues, with these kids that, coming in. And, so everybody's talking about everything you could possibly think about for Rasa. And then, marriage and family and children and that, all this kind of stuff. And Cathy gets up and says, what about gay people in the context of Rasa Bukumi? And you have to understand, what year is this, Cathy? 1988? Something like that. And so it might have been cool for white people to do that, but it was not cool there. And I realized that even though I was out, I had to respond to that. And so she and I, and a group of other people, started the first La Familia on UC Berkeley campus. And some of you may or may not know this, but they ended up being a familia all over the country that was Rasa, queer people, men and women, etc. And I say that because we were not stupid. We said we were family. And even we weren't considered family at that time. And that's just true. And I think it's really, really hard because things now, there's so much language to say who we are. And sometimes the most basic parts of just being queer in the world is not understood, even when we have so much rhetoric about it. Right? So I really honor Cathy. Cathy's my life, I love her family, love her son, and his mother. And anyway, that's what I wanted to say. But thank you. It feels really good to be back home. I really love it. I really honor, I forget everybody's name, so I'm sorry, but I really honor the two of you folks who have made this place possible. It's just really, I'm so moved by it and encouraged, and more power to you. I wish you every success in this project. I know what hard work it is. So thank you. Thanks to everybody to show up. It's great to see you again, Naomi, after so long. And I see you at the Canto again. Plus the folks I know that guy that was filming. my students. Okay. All right. So, time here. So, yes, buy this book before you leave. Okay, I'm going to read from it, and purposely, because these books are, they're donated, right? And I dragged them all the way here. And right now I'm living in Sacramento, that's a long ways to walk, and I brought the books. So, and I'd be happy to sign them. And so please buy them, they're really not very expensive. This book is called Native Country of the Heart. It took me 10 years to do it. I want to say those of you that are writers, it takes a long time to do things well. We can count on inspiration some of the time, right? And if you get a good dream, you get from the bags, right? But all the rest of it is just put it trabajo. And as my partner said, it says, if a visual artist, if all the people who had talent had discipline, we'd all be out of jobs. It really is that. It really is just that simple. So I'm going to read from Native Country of the Heart. It is not a biography, it's a memoir. It's not a biography and it's not an autobiography. It's a portrait of a relationship. And the relationship is between my mother and I. So the longest and the first It has like four books, sections in it. And the longest is basically all the years until I left home. So, the first 18 or 19 years of my life. And I'm gonna read the intro and then the ending of that. The other sections are basically all the moments in my life where I reconnected with my mother. I lived in different places in my life. In New York City, I lived up here. I'm from LA. I grew up about a block and a half from the San Diego Mission. So the book is those relationships. Every time we kind of came together, and so there were very critical moments in which we came together, although I was always connected with my family. But critical moments, like when I took you to Mexico City for the first time, things like that. But basically, the other part of the book is when she basically is diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and so it's the whole last part of that is discovering it, then going through it, and then finally her passing. She passed in 2005. This book came out in 2019. It takes time. So this is the intro. I'll just read part of that intro. And it is Mother's Day after all. The prologue is called Una Salta para Atrás. Elvira Isabel Moraga was not the stuff of literature. Few bemoan the memory loss of the unlettered. My mother and her generation of Mexican-American women was to disappear quietly, unmarked by the letter of memory, the memory of letter. But when our storytellers go, taking their unrecorded memory with them, we, their descendants, go too at here. Maybe it's about turning 60, so that was an example. Maybe at such a substantive age, one can finally weave together enough of the threads of one's life to interpret a design from them. For my part, I hold one thickly braided cord as story, my queer self and my writer self. And each would bring me home to my Mexicanism, and my Mexicanism would bring me home to an earlier America, to the Indian memory of bay leaf and madron, desert, chaparral, the Pacific Ocean, always an ocean breeze away. It would also bring home to me a culture of memory and prophecy, the harbinger of loss upon the horizon. As a U.S. inheritor of Mexican ancestry, I walk the reddening road of an occupied America that anoints membership only to those born north of the watery divide of El Rio Grande, a border of river as thirsty as the desert into which it leads, leaving my relatives to drown in its grit. Growing up, my elders, well-meaning, told my generation, go that way, hijos. Look north to your future. They asked us to betray them, to forget them. Go that way, mija. They didn't know the cost. How to explain the complexity of this, what it means to be not just me, but us. To know yourself as a member of a pueblo on the edge of a kind of extinction, at the same time a lesbian lover and mother where you truly do live your life in constant navigation to whatever part of your identity is being snuffed out that morning in the classroom, at the community meeting, the gasoline station, the takeout counter, Mexican, mixed blood, queer, female, almost Indian, and a poverty masked by circumstance. There was no there was no library in our home growing up. I did not sneak to read beneath the secrecy of flashlights under blankets. My reading stumbled out loud and my handwriting fell thick and crooked on wide ruled paper. But I knew to listen. I listened to Avila's stories, to my tia's stories, to my sister's promptings. Remember this moment, hermanita. I made mental records of their words of being read to at night by that same sister who believed in romance. Something that came on a horse and swept the woman up, not so unlike Elvida's dreams. I had only one romance, the love of an intractable Elvida. And this is what would shape my lesbianism, and this is what would mark my road as a Mexican, and this is what would require me to remember before and beyond my mother. I am a woman who knew myself daughter and son at once, a protector and provider for women and children. I've learned to confront police and rapists and silent enemies from within, and I've lived to tell of it. I had never fully grasped the early years of my mother's life until I slowed down long enough to silently witness her last ones. In her final handfuls of years, the full distance of a near-century lifetime would flash back in a second of recall, never to reappear. And yet my mother's failing mind, once and forever, convinced me of the body's ability to hold memory, which long surpassed her ability to speak it. It seems that when the body goes, memory resides in the molecules about us. We breathe in the last exhale of our mother's breath. This is what they bequeath to us, as they also bequeath their stories. Perhaps my writing has never really been about me. Perhaps it was about she all along, she without letters, she fallen off the map of recorded histories, she that is my history and my future with every Mexicana female worker who comes to or is born into these lands of an ill-manifested destiny, she, the first and last point of my return. Vidas is the story of our forgotten, the landscape of loss paved over by American dreams come true. And maybe that's the worst of it. I'm shaking. I can't believe I even know I was nervous. And maybe that's the worst of it, or what I feel. That our dreams can come true in America at the cost of a profound senility of spirit. If we forget ourselves, who will be left to remember us? And so, I follow the trail of my mother's fleeting reminiscences, picking up in the wake of her steps each and every discarded scrap of unwritten testimonial. This is what the spiritual country of my mother's departure asked of me in the unspoken world of the deeply, deeply human. So this chapter is called, I think you'll be able to guess what it's about. It's called Don't Ask, Don't Tell. You're leaving with a secret. My mother's words grabbed me by the throat. The phone falls to my chest. I'm 23 years old, and this is what I know of a black hole. Her statement foretells my exile. She is losing me. She knows it. And into the dark firmament of that silence, Elvida, the braver of us, has ventured. I can lie and continue on without her, or tell her the truth and what? My Echo Park apartment has been thoroughly vacated, except for an overnight bag. It was my father's birthday, and I called my mom to let her know that I would be arriving in the late afternoon for the family barbecue. For nearly 3 years, I had been spending less and less time with my familia, and more time in the lesbian life of Los Angeles, Silver Lake, Hollywood, Venice Beach, Echo Park. I can't tell you, Mom. You won't accept it. I immediately detect the rising bitterness in her voice, which I understand is fear. How could it be me? I've been through everything with you already. And she had. We both could run through the list of my transgressions since I started college. At 18, my refusal to keep going to church, my preference for pants over any kind of skirt, the announcement with boyfriend standing oh so brave and 6 foot small in the kitchen of my mother's resistance. Cherrie and I are planning to move in together. I was heterosexual sometime in my life. She slams out of the room, unable to face the verdict of such scandal before the Moraga family jury. And then came the long cross-country trips with questionable female company. No, Mom, I said. The phone cord, a shrinking connection between us. This one's just too hard. And that's all I have to say. When a great wail erupts from her throat. No, she cries. No, baby, he says. No, not that. No puede ser. She's dying. This is how it sounds to me over the telephone line. Her grief rips open my chest when I suddenly realize, no, it's me. I'm the one who is dying. My mother's llanto tells me so. This is what La Llorona sounds like. There is no mistaking it. It is the cry of a mother mourning the loss of her child. But how is it I can be standing with the phone in my hand and be dying at the same time? I stare at the parquet floor. This is what I feared as a child, bolting doors and nodding off to an endless stream of useless prayers. That who I was would be the end to all I knew as familia. I mourned the loss, not for myself, but for her. I'm sorry, Mama, I cried. I'm so sorry to hurt you. Suddenly, there was a shift in her. It feels strategic. As my mother, she will try every tactic in her arsenal to protect her daughter from this path of heartbreak, to protect her daughter from abuse, from loneliness, from drug and alcohol addiction, from the sorrow she imagines such a life will bring me. She accuses others of influencing me. She accuses me of running around with the wrong kind of people. She calls me weak when she knows me strong, a follower when she knows I am a leader. Until finally she draws out the last weapon of her defense. How can you get satisfaction from a woman? And she throws the word at me, satisfaction. A switchblade, nastier than any pelvis thrusting Mick Jagger could conjure. And it is the very best thing she could have said, because I had suffered too long and too hard for the right to love, and not even my mother was going to make me feel guilty for it. I would not abandon myself. That's none of your business, I say. And she is silent. And into the aperture of that silence, I insert the truest thing I can think to add. Don't make me choose, Mama. Because if I have to choose between this life and my family, I have to choose my life. And then, that's it. There is no fight. I hear it through the quiet of the phone receiver. I wait until she speaks, all the fury in her voice gone. And she says, how could you say that there's anything in this life that you could do that you wouldn't be my daughter? And that's it. My mother would continue to suffer my poor choice in girlfriends, my unreliable interstate car trips, my backpack adventures, my solo sojourns to Mexico, my sometimes precarious inner-city dwellings in New York, Boston, Oakland, San Francisco, my too many months away from her without a visit, and too many weeks without a phone call, my political activism where in every evening news protest, she anxiously looked for my hollering face among the crowd. But we did not lose each other by pretending we were other than who we were. That night after the birthday barbecue and the familia had all gone home, my parents would walk along our gravelly driveway and watch me back out the car, following it and waving goodbye until I was out of sight. As always, the last thing I saw as I spun my car to the street was my mother blessing the air of my passage with a prayer for my protection. The next day, I would travel El Camino Real, the royal road from Los Angeles to San Francisco, ironically retracing the steps of those very missionaries I was fleeing. It was 1977, and for this Mexican-American, once Catholic daughter, Highway 101 was not royal but real. I had left that mission town of San Gabriel having told my truth. The truth will set you free, but as the young philosopher once wrote, not until it's finished with you. My mother had made sure of that. One other piece. You can see I miss poetry. I really miss poetry. But lately, not lately, just for a long time, it's just a lot of things are coming to me, with these essays, because there's a call to respond that sometimes to me needs a kind of argument. But I don't mean fighting. I just mean just straight up saying things. And of course, to me, poetry is embedded in all of it. I always feel like, and I see this in my students, that the ones that if they start off as poets and they start to write prose, they're the best prose writers there are. You're off my head, you're off so well informed. So this is actually the beginning. Lately, I think when you get older, if they start doing, I did a 25th anniversary of Wedding in the Wings. My son's now 30. I did, this one is writing 1978 to 1999. And it's basically works that came from Loving and the Warriors and The Last Generation. And I selected the ones that, the bulk of it is there, but also has tons of footnotes because, my reality was now people have to know what happened there. So it was a lot of work. But I enjoyed it. I enjoyed doing it. And I am very lucky to be able to have the opportunity to do that. I realize that. That's not a given that people even get down about your work. After a period of time. And I can assure you, I often feel that way too. Some people may feel differently, but sometimes you feel like, I'll tell you quite honestly, sometimes I think, when you look at kind of the national world, we're Mexican, right? We're Chicano writers, we're Latino writers, really. And the ones that oftentimes get the most visibility are popular. They're popular writers. So they're not necessarily giving us the critical stuff that we need to be reading about who we are, and that's what I think we all need to do it. Anyway, so this is the I wrote this, it came out in 2023, so this is, I'm going to read just some sections of it, and I'll stop there, but it begins with a dream, so that was one of those gifts from the guys, the dream. The title of it is called An Estranged and Unrecognizable City. The dream. I arrive in a strange city. There's a male guide, a friend. I push a stroller, protective of its contents. We roll along the sidewalk in the effort to avoid crossing the impossible bumper-to-bumper traffic. Suddenly, an elder woman appears, literally out of nowhere. She collapses onto the cement in front of us. I run to her while a young woman whisks past me and carries off with the stroller. I catch a quick glimpse of her face, and her resemblance to the baby is unmistakable. And I am left cradling my own mother in my arms. Alvida's face is as ancient. Alvida's face is as ancient and beautifully chiseled as the last look I had of her upon her death 17 years ago. Mama, I say, are you hurt? How did you get here? Her only answer is the calming gaze of her eyes. And although I am holding my mother, she has linked her arms around mine so that it is more she who carries me. I'm aware that I'm beginning to wake up, and so I hold my eyes closed to hold fast to the dream, to sustain the tactile physicality of Rita's presence back in my life. It lasts for an extended moment, somewhere between the material and dream world. And in that place, I am reminded that I am loved. Like, hello, fucker. Shake your hand, Even in a strange, as you say, this is the introduction to Loving the Warriors, right? So I just kind of contextualize this. So even in an estranged and unrecognizable city, we are reunited with our relations. This is what is required of us now, to find other ways of knowing, of transmitting messages to one another across generations, living and gone. From all parts of the world, peoples are sent into migration, so that even the ground beneath their feet may no longer speak to them. What was wrong before has gotten worse, more so than we could have imagined. How does one speak of spirit, not as an escape, but as a radical reckoning with the horrific conditions of a dying world? This is what we ask of one another in slow whispers. This is how we continue to love. The right to love was the original impetus for loving in the war years and would impact all of my writings that would follow. In 1977, this meant for me the right to be a lesbian. At the time, I didn't know it would come to mean so much more. The collection of these writings reflect the trajectory of some 20 years of selected works. And I don't read that part. For me, the beauty of this revision process of writings, some more than 4 decades old, is it allowed me to consider the younger writer who first composed those works as she, not me. I admit I miss that young writer, especially in the earliest works, her unabashed bravura in breaking taboos, writing of the desirous body, the Chicana mixed blood mixed of queer female body, the color and class of it, in all its shameless struggling viscerality, and all in the effort to get herself and perhaps some of us free. I admire that young poet lover, frequently recognize her in my own students' writings. They and she challenge me to speak to what remains unsaid, hidden in the shadows of unacknowledged censorships, to proclaim aloud that theory can never wholly comprehend desire. This is a work of poets. The first writings in loving emerged from that poetic impulse. Reviewing these pages that came after, I find myself saddened to discover how the poems become fewer as the politica presses on and harder. And so it continues, even harder. I just okay. The real war is not just, and this was before all of the Palestinians started, but the real war is not just the senseless fodder of the Ukraine-Russian conflict, nor the cruel dregs of a mercenary 20-year U.S. occupation of Afghanistan, nor it is even the forever wounding of Palestine. The real war is one that truly warrants the title World War. Marx was right in his prediction that capitalism would eventually destroy itself. But did he think it would destroy the planet in the process? For some of us, there is an occasional reprieve from these thoughts. But reprieve is by nature fleeting. We may decide to look away from the slow meltdown of our planet and its once impermeable monuments, the Iceland glacier, the coral reefs, the old-growth redwoods of Califas. We keep telling ourselves the latest virus will be the last one, in a global economy where disease can travel more fluidly and frequently than human beings. But everywhere we turn, there is another mass cashier, a drought-turned flood, a burning sequoia, a disappeared island, a shuttered diner, a classroom of checkerboard squares of sleepy-eyed, disinterested students, and a well-meaning teacher trying to make contact. There's always another fresh hill of grave dirt, and another creature carrier to blame for it. We are not immune. In the public collective consciousness, there can be no reprieve. There is only pain, only loss, only the forced removal of hundreds of thousands from their homelands due to environmental upheaval and stupid wars of avarice off and online. At 70, I'm learning to inhabit that place of the last generation, to be free to tell the story differently, to write without convention, to script in an original tongue, to reimagine how we continue to love in writing, unbound by the warring languages of the corporate academy, the parroting of the evening news, the one-upmanship of pundits and scholars, the often violent verbiage of social media, and its ubiquitous platforms. I look forward to the next 20 years, although one is not guaranteed the longevity. So this is the last generation for my generation. And in that, we have a calling, a personal and public responsibility to continue to say what has not been said, or was once said but now forgotten. We who were young during one of the most liberatory moments in U.S. history, let us name them so we do not forget. The Civil Rights Movement, United Farm Workers, Black Power, El Movimiento Chicano, the Young Lords, AIM, the American Indian Movement, the Asian American Political Alliance, the Anti-Vietnam War Movement, SNCC, the Third World Liberation Front, the Panthers, the Brown Berets, the I Hotel Filipino protest, Women's Liberation, the Gay and Lesbian Movement, Anti-Apartheid South Africa, Central American Solidarity, FSLN, SMLN, HIV/AIDS activism, the Third World Women's Alliance, Free Palestine, immigrant rights, trans liberation, reproductive rights, abortion, anti-sterilization abuse, transnational unicolor feminism, and onwards. Today, in the United States, that she connects people old and young, queer and straight, we have been systematically separated and censored from one another by the mythologies of free enterprise, the rights of property, and a rabid, consequential, competitive individualism. In many traditional societies, cross-generational exchange, providing consejo y conocimiento, and our daily labors threaded a fabric of continuity within the community. From the vantage point of 40 years of political and arts engagement, I can only say that there is so much to know from the past in the radical reconstruction of the future. As I have aged, I have learned to look further and further back to find respuesta, to insist that to remember is to recreate, and that decolonization requires the re-Indianization of heart and mind. Perhaps we can never uncover what that means, but perhaps we can uncover what that means by simply deciding to make our way home again. I don't know. For the next generation, it's always important to remember you know. For the next generation, what do you know, the young ones ask us? Teach me of what I have not seen. Our time together is short on this planet. The onus on the next generations is impossible to contemplate. Everything and nothing is required of you. My generation can't presume to ask you to make the world well. I only offer these early words because they were brave once upon a time, for their time, and you will all really need to be brave. But only you can determine what that requires. In the inquiry resides the hope. Thank you.